happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we have a lot of news to cover this week, and we have a special guest because you probably read that Utah has enacted a bill to ban discrimination against LGBT people. We'll discuss whether this, what's called a compromise bill with the dominant Mormon church, is good for Utah and the future of LGBT rights legislation in the United States, with Kate Kendall of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, a native of Utah.
The bill has gotten a lot of press on both sides, so we're going to straighten it all out with Kate. We also have progress to report in Iowa, Alabama, Arizona, Puerto Rico, Michigan, Washington, D.C., and East Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yet there was some regress this week to report in Alabama, Florida, and Indiana.
Reformed Jews have elected their first out gay or lesbian leader.
The Presbyterian Church has opened marriage to same-sex couples as right-wing fundamentalist Christians elsewhere are mobilizing to take over the country.
I'm sorry we even have to deal with Dolce and Gabbana. Maybe we can dispose of that in about 10 seconds, but they did inspire calls for a boycott of their products, not that anyone was buying them anyway, over their condemnation of gay families and children born through in vitro fertilization.
LGBT groups marched in the St. Patrick's Day parades in Boston, Washington, D.C., and New York City for the first time, but New York still bans Irish gay groups in their Irish parade.
Which is why we were demonstrating yesterday. Andy is going to review Helen Mirren as Queen Elizabeth II in the audience, and Kristen Chenoweth in the revival of On the 20th Century. You are not giving a thumbs down to Kristen Chenoweth.
No, I didn't. I kind of, but just a little like this. I'll tell you. We'll
the
get
play
to it.
or her?
Let's the play. Oh, she was terrific.
Yeah. Okay. Phew.
It's Compton and Green. I love them. But anyway, now the review is done. Let's talk.
Well, we're giving a big thumbs up to Kate Kendall, who is the executive director of the National Center.
And I can't even
sing. Yet to be determined. We'll get to that.
We're trying to make you sing.
Trust me. Executive Director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, headquartered in San Francisco, but working all over the country. And we were happy to find she was in town so that we could bring her in here and have her explain the Utah law to us. Now, there were 3 laws up for grabs in Utah. 296, which would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the non-discrimination law. 297, which was slightly different versions of that. We'll get to that. And 322, which was a horrendous law, which went down the drain.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So the controversy is the Mormon Church said, okay, we'll stop discriminating, or we'll support non-discrimination laws that include gay people, transgender people in housing and employment, not public accommodations. Nope. And Equality Utah said, hooray, hooray, and they all got together and they worked this out and they passed this law. And some people say, whoa, you sold us out, this is not enough, and it gives them too big a religious exemption. And other people say, glass half full, this is a great step forward. We got the Mormon Church, which has been one of our biggest opponents, off the dime, and this lays the groundwork for more.
What happened?
Well, I would put myself in the camp of the latter folks. I definitely think this is glass half full, far from perfect. Utah is as near to a theocracy as any place in this country. It was founded by the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church dominates every aspect of political and mostly social life. If you're a Mormon, and I grew up Mormon, it's not just that you go to church on Sunday. It is a lifestyle. It is a way of life. So the influence of the Mormon Church and its view doctrinally of LGBT people in this culture is ubiquitous. It touches every aspect of your life. So for the church, and I happen to be there, a few weeks ago when my alma mater, my undergraduate alma mater, Weber State College, opened their first LGBT resource center. And that morning, I thought that was historic enough, but that morning is when the church had their press conference declaring their support for non-discrimination for LGBT people. So what I've seen happen and the arc that I've witnessed has been tremendous. What the bill does is it takes the existing religious exemptions, which are already far broader than under federal law, because Utah did that in when they very first passed a non-discrimination law that included race and gender and religion, and it imports gender identity and sexual orientation. It does expand some of the language around religious affiliations and religious organizations. I think that additional language does not make the exemptions more broad. That might have to be litigated, but the bottom line is, for the first time, and we started hearing stories after the governor signed the bill, even before it's gone into effect, which won't happen for another 15, 20 days, we were hearing from transgender clients that for the first time, they felt safe going to the bathroom at their workplace. So this had a real impact on the lives of LGBT people in Utah. But because the exemptions are already so broad, and because it included things like, it exempts the Boy Scouts, it allows clerks to opt out of performing marriages altogether if they don't want to marry same-sex couples. Well, those are repugnant provisions.
Except for the fact that the Boy Scouts were already exempt.
They were, and so it just codifies existing law, which is why I feel like it's important to have a conversation of what's true, which, from my perspective, my truth is, this is good for Utah. What's also true and can coexist at the same time is it's not a model for the rest of the country.
We hope. Let me ask you a glass half empty question.
Sure.
This does have a broad religious exemption, and what it basically says, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you have any religious affiliation, actually there aren't religious hospitals in Utah.
There are. The LDS hospital.
But it is so broad that an employer, even though there's employment non-discrimination, can say, well, I have a religious objection to hiring a gay person as a nurse.
Not true. I do not believe that is true. I do not believe that the affiliation language is broad enough for an individual to simply say, oh, I just don't like gay people, or I have a religious objection to gay people. It has to be that if the entity is wholly owned by a church that has doctrine opposed to recognition of marriage, for example, for same-sex couples, they probably will be exempt. But it's not going to be good enough to say, you're a bishop in a Mormon ward, you own a car wash, and everybody that you have employed works is somehow also related to the church. You won't be able to say, oh, therefore I'm affiliated. So it has to be true and substantial.
So the exemption is limited to religiously affiliated institutions like Mormon hospitals or Catholic hospitals, but that's not new, you're saying,
that's
for
not
the
new.
human rights
that
law?
Applies to race and gender as well. Now, of course, there are federal protections that protect from discrimination based on race and gender that don't protect LGBT people, but so the practical effect does expose us to some vulnerability. I wouldn't say that this is everything we would want, even in Utah. But I'll tell you, based on where we were before and where we are now, this is a step forward.
And what does it do in terms of like local ordinances in Utah, like Salt Lake City?
Which were better.
Yeah.
That's not true. It does preempt local ordinances, but the ordinance in Salt Lake City already had a broad religious exemption that applied only to LGBT people. So it's somewhat mixed when you view it through a lens of what we want for our community nationwide, but I can't help feeling slightly parochial when I think about what it was for me to grow up in Utah and the people I know in Utah. This is good for them.
Well, I mean, Troy Williams from Equality Utah called it a monumental step forward. But take us through this specific exemption that's only in the gay law, right? Where it says that employers can set reasonable rules and practices for sex-specific facilities such as restrooms and showers. What does that mean?
Well, but there's additional language. That language dovetails with additional language which requires employers to assure that a transgender individual can use facilities consistent with their gender identity. Now, if they want to have a women's restroom and a men's restroom, they can. They can have sex-segregated facilities, but they must allow a transgender woman to use the women's bathroom or the locker room, or a transgender man to use the men's bathroom or the men's locker room.
And just to finish off on this, what about the business of letting employees express their religious or moral beliefs in the workplace in a reasonable, non-disruptive, and non-harassing way?
Well, an example of that would be, I get married to my wife, I come back to the workplace, and an employee in the break room says, well, you know, now you're going to hell. That would not be actionable. But if then what happened is I started to get an email every week reminding me that I'm going to hell, or I got literature on my desk, then I could sue for a hostile work environment being created. So the one-off comment expressing disapproval is not something you could sue for, and I would say that you couldn't sue for that under probably any statute that protects non-discrimination. But if an environment is created that is hostile for me to feel safe working there, that would be something I could now sue under with this new law that I wouldn't have been able to do anything about previously.
Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my impression that the church itself, the Mormon church, owns a lot of businesses, and far beyond most of what we think of as religious ownership or action in the business world. Are they going to be exempted in all those businesses from these kinds of rules?
Well, some of them might be. I mean, I think the hospitals, I think BYU, which is the Mormon-owned educational institution, I do not think this would apply to, say, Zion's Bank, which is church-owned, but has the bank has no ecclesiastical function. And I do think there, as you know, and again, because statutes are a blunt instrument to try and solve a social problem, you know, it would be great if we could just write a statute that says don't be mean, and that would be sufficient. This may require some litigation to really figure out what the parameters are. But I think a reasonable interpretation, and frankly, I think the church's interpretation, the church doesn't want a bunch of litigation over this. I think their line in the sand is going to be, we do not want an individual to be discriminated against based on their sexual orientation or their gender identity that has nothing to do with their ability to do their job. If there's an ecclesiastical component to their job, if you have ecclesiastical functions in your hospital, it's the minister that you're hiring, or it's somebody to deal with some sort of pastoral care, okay, you might not be covered. But if you're talking about the janitor or you're talking about the bank teller, I think this law protects those folks.
But you are talking about things like BYU housing not available to same-sex couples.
That's true.
Or whatever.
That exemption exists.
Now, you know, the Mormon Church, prime opponent of same-sex marriage, still an opponent of same-sex marriage, prime funder of Prop 8 in California, not changing its doctrinal stance on any of this. No. But this is a PR win for us, with them saying they don't want to discriminate.
And a PR win for them.
Absolutely. So how do you interpret all of that?
Well, you know, this is probably, I suppose, for me, the most important piece of what's gone on here. I feel like what the church has done is they've marginalized the most virulent anti-gay voices in Utah, people that I interacted with time and time again, and they've elevated the principles I feel like I grew up with as a young Mormon kid. Decency, kindness, mutual respect. The church does not have that sort of mean streak, nastiness. You know, they're not out there with signs like you're going to burn in hell. That is not a Mormon thing. So I feel like this moves the church more in line with principles and values that I felt like they shirked and turned on their head by supporting Prop 8. And I've talked to many high-up individuals in the Mormon hierarchy who feel like their involvement in Prop 8 was a mistake. And I feel like this is their way to try and come back to values that are more universal. They're never going to change their doctrine, that's true. But I do think what transcends their doctrine are principles of kindness and respect and decency, and that's what they're trying to elevate by being in this position on non-discrimination.
So were you one of the people at the table while this was being written, or were in touch with our side? Was our side really at the table?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Our side, the local activists at Equality Utah, the lawyers, the legal scholars, negotiated directly with the legislature and with lawyers for the Mormon Church. There's a conservative scholar that was involved in advising the legislature and probably the Mormon Church. She was never at any of the negotiations, as I understand it. But this was a very vigorous back and forth, and there were elements that, particularly this conservative scholar and perhaps the more virulent anti-gay elements, wanted inserted in 296 that did not end up in the final bill. I mean, there were significant concessions made by the Mormon Church and what they wanted and what they were being advised to include. And then there were concessions we made, and I think our concessions, less than compromises, more concessions around like the Boy Scouts and the clerks. I don't feel like anything that we gave in on goes to the heart of what this is designed to do.
Right. So the worry is the precedent, of course, and especially with something like the clerks, we can say government employees don't have to do their jobs anymore. They can beg off for religious reasons if they want to. So and we're in this atmosphere where there are 60 anti-gay bills in the country, and everybody wants to do this, especially around religious freedom. So to what extent does this, feed into all that?
I do think that it is a perfectly fair concern to feel like what happened in Utah could be exported to other states. But I also want to believe that we have the sophistication and the gravitas and the competence and the ability to fight those efforts in other states. Utah is a unique ecosystem, given that it all swims in one direction. The elite and the power in Utah all goes one direction. It's not as if it's 30% Catholic, 30% evangelical, 20% Jewish, 20%, agnostic. It is overwhelmingly Mormon in terms of the power structure. Other states are not Utah, and I think we should resist very strongly using our relationships, using our money, using our connections, using boots on the ground to fight back against any bill like this being proposed anywhere else. But you know what the truth is? No bill like this has been produced anywhere else. Every bill that has been introduced in every other state is about denying protections. There's been nothing introduced in these worst states that would protect us at all.
Well, in fact, Utah, I guess, becomes the 22nd state to have a statewide law that provides some kind of non-discrimination protections, and we do need those bills in the other 28 states and federally. But there are a lot of these religious freedom bills being proposed in states all over. Some we've succeeded in beating back so far, but some are advancing ahead.
They are.
And this whole right-wing backlash to our success is getting pretty scary these days.
This is the thing that most frightens me, that, you look at the trajectory of every civil rights struggle and you see a high watermark. For us, it's winning marriage in this chapter of our work. And then you see a backlash, or you see a retrenchment. Roe versus Wade, you now look at choice in this country, it is in tatters and in shambles, and for poor women, especially in rural areas, almost non-existent. We cannot look back 20 years from now and say, oh, well, we should have seen it coming. We should see it coming. And these religious liberty bills are, I don't even want to use they're religious entitlement bills. They provide entitlements that individuals should not be able to access. Religious freedom is alive and well in this country. Nothing has changed about the First Amendment, but people now want to use religion as a license to discriminate. And I do feel like we do not, as a community, take seriously enough the graveness of this threat.
Except our viewers on Gay USA.
So let me tell you, folks, so in Indiana or in Georgia or in Alabama, where these bills are advancing, we have to put our hair on fire. We have to be at these state houses. We have to engage. We have to get businesses to come out. We have to do what we did in Arizona, stop that terrible license to discriminate bill in its tracks. And we have to do it again and again and again everywhere it pops up.
But businesses are not stepping up the way they did against the Arizona bill. And my personal unsupported theory is that, in fact, the right wing has gotten to these businesses and they are threatening them. What did I hear? That Delta was threatened with losing a tax exemption in Georgia if they came out against the religious liberty bill. Yes, and I think the right wing saw what happened in Arizona, the Koch brothers, the Paul Singers of this world, whatever, and said, you know, we don't want that, and we want to pass these bills, and we're going to now go to these businesses and say, we're not going to stand for you doing that anymore. You watch out or you're going to be punished.
Well, my understanding is Paul Singer's organization is American Unity Fund, is at the forefront of pushing back on these religious entitlements.
Yeah, and at the forefront of electing every Republican legislature.
Well, hang on. Let's finish the point.
I understand that.
And David Koch, who's for same-sex marriage, they have elected these legislatures that are doing this crap to us. So what good is it?
Well, no, but this is what we have to do. We can't, even though we understand that we are dealing in some of these relationships with folks who are Republican and Republicans are traditionally opposed to LGBT equality, we have to understand we're dealing with a country where, what is it, 44 state houses are dominated by Republicans.
Because of Paul Singer and David Koch.
Okay, so what's the answer? We don't work with them at all?
Yes, don't take absolutely.
We're giving them cover by taking their money and fighting.
Well, see, this is where we disagree.
Do you take
They're
their
the
money?
ones who have the influence. If they can stop these bills from
not.
moving forward, no, they are. They are actually in coalitions where they are trying to stop these bills from moving forward. And okay, so hang on, let me just finish the thought. And I think we need to have them use whatever influence they have. But part of the problem is we've created a vacuum because our community is not as engaged as we need to be in these states. And so when we create a vacuum, Republicans step in with friends they already know to influence these legislators. If we want to influence, we have to stand toe-to-toe. And I feel like in a lot of the states we're not.
Maybe you're right that they have stopped a couple of bad gay bills, but all the anti-abortion bills, they haven't stopped those. They don't care about that. They're dismantling American democracy. They're about to take over the Electoral College by changing the way states vote, which is perfectly legal. And that's their agenda. They're wrecking the country.
No, after Citizens United and Hobby Lobby, you won't get any argument from me. But my point is, if we're going to strategically operate strategically to defeat these religious entitlement bills, we have to partner with whoever can help us defeat them, because we don't have numbers in most of these state houses to do it just with Democrats and just with liberal Republicans.
And I would say we have to get our side in gear and united, and with all the other groups who are our traditional allies, from the NAACP to the Latino groups, etc. That's what we need to unite with.
And I agree with that.
And I would say the Republicans have been at this for a long time, building these huge majorities in these state legislatures. And there are a lot of us in these states, valiant local people who are fighting back, but don't have the resources yet. But I'm concerned, I said this to you at an event last night, we have the legal standing to win marriage in this country. Yep. And we have an equal protection argument that's really, to my mind, easy and good. I thought DOMA was unconstitutional before it was even passed. All of that played out very easily, to my mind. What is the legal theory or legal strategy to go after these religious entitlement bills? Can we take them to court? Is this going to play out at all legally?
Well, I think for some of them we will be able to challenge, because some of them are so extreme. And you can show that the only reason they were passed, and this is Kennedy's favorite theory, was to harm gay people.
Animus.
Exactly. And so I think for many of them, we will have a record where we can challenge them. But what I want to see happen is what we did in Wyoming, what we did in West Virginia. I want to see them never see the light of day.
Well, sure.
And I do feel like there's a way in which, as we come to closing the chapter on marriage and, winning marriage, I think there is, I fear that there's a little bit of complacency that we're bulletproof. and that even some of the worst things, oh, those won't really happen, that won't really occur. It's a little bit evocative to me of where we were when Prop 8 was going on in California. The number of people that said to me, oh, there's no way that will ever pass. We cannot take that for granted. Our opposition is going to fight us every step of the way, and this is their new tool.
So we do need federal legislation, or we need federal court rulings that say anti-LGBT discrimination is sex discrimination, and make that a blanket ruling. That sounds more likely at this point, given who our Congress is. But we are writing a new comprehensive bill. Are you part of that effort? And how open is that process going to be so that we don't end up with a bad bill like ENDA?
NCLR is a part of that process. Our federal policy director, Maya Rupert, has been in the many, many meetings that have been happening primarily in D.C. to discuss the bill, what it would look like, what would the scope of it be, what would the provisions be, what's the strategy behind it. I don't think there's an actual draft yet. I mean, I haven't seen a draft. There might be some language going around. I haven't seen a draft.
Spring or
I think it would cover, my understanding is the design is that it would cover employment, housing, public accommodations, credit. There might be something that I'm missing, but and that it would be considered to be comprehensive.
And how really different would it be from the old LGBT right, the old gay and lesbian rights bill in the Congress, which is just to amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964? I know there's a hesitation about that, but how different would it be?
It would be similar in that I'm sure much of the same language would be very similar, but it would be its own standalone bill for LGBT people. And there's discussion back and forth about the amending. I feel like if we lived in a world of sane, rational political process where we didn't see such tremendous dysfunction, we probably could amend something like the Civil Rights Act or Title VII to make explicit that it covers sexual orientation and gender identity. But the level of dysfunction and venality is such now in Washington that you can't do anything that's rational. So I think this having our own bill is the next best thing. But the other process, and I just testified before the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, is to really push this issue that Title VII does cover sexual orientation.
That's sex discrimination.
It's sex discrimination. Right. The EEOC has already made clear that discrimination based on gender identity is covered by Title VII. But we need to really push against and change the precedent that says sexual orientation discrimination is not sex discrimination and find ourselves covered by Title VII. Because if we may have a great bill that we love, an omnibus civil rights bill, and where's it going to go in Congress?
Right. Yeah.
And it does look hopeful in that direction. So we're way over time already. So let's just quickly say, I'd like to get into the who's arguing before the Supreme Court, but I'll resist. I
don't even know yet.
Do you have any doubt that we're going to win marriage at the Supreme Court this spring?
Well, I feel like it'd be super foolish to say I have no doubt that we're going to win.
Okay, point taken.
But I feel pretty good about our chances. I think we have the 5 votes we need. I don't see Kennedy, which everyone would acknowledge is the swing vote, essentially undermining his entire legacy on our behalf.
Although he did say
not
that
going this far.
He did say that states have the right to define marriage.
Yeah, there's a little bit of troubling language in what he wrote in the DOMA ruling, striking down that part of DOMA that forbade federal recognition. But I think it's a little bit too expansive view of that language to think that then means that states are free, again, based only on animus, no other rational basis.
To discriminate.
To not recognize or perform marriages of same-sex couples.
And the other thing that NCLR is heavily involved in is trying to get rid of this conversion therapy for minors. You have a whole project, Born Perfect, and you seem to be making progress.
We are. It's been very gratifying. In fact, in places you wouldn't expect. Bills moving forward in Iowa, in Oregon, in Colorado, in New York. We opened up this project because we started hearing more and more from survivors of conversion therapy, and we started to recognize it was even more widespread than we had previously believed. And the damage done is just incalculable. To take a 13-year-old and say to them, under the color of licensure and professionalism and support of your family, that you are wrong and disordered and must change, I mean, the scars that are left are lifelong. So we have made some strong headway. We've banned conversion therapy by licensed therapists on minors in California, in New Jersey, and we're hoping another half dozen or so states. And in Washington, D.C.
And that passed congressional review, which is shocking.
It did. It slid through. And the final thing I'll say about ending conversion therapy is, look, we're realistic. We know we're not going to pass bans in 50 states, but the other thing we want to do is create a climate of tremendous public education. So if you're a parent, you love your kid. Parents love their kids. They think they're saving their kids by having them endure this practice. But if they do a Google search of conversion therapy and the first 2 pages are how much damage is done, that's not what they'll have their kid do. So that's also a win.
Right. Now, if you want to learn more about that project, Born Perfect, and all about Kate Kendall's work, you go to nclrights.org and look it up on the internet and learn all about it. And if you look into Kate's cup, you will see that it is more than half full.
I wasn't that thirsty.
Thank you, Kate.
My pleasure, as always. Thanks, you guys.
We'll see you next time you're in town.
I'll see you next time. You got it. And we'll go golfing. Come to California.
Deal. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. In the 5 minutes we have left, we will attempt to tell you some news. And actually, well, you know, one of the big headlines this week, Aaron Schock is out of Congress. Closet case. It'd be nice if the news media dealt with that. I've always thought that anyone who lied about his personal life was perfectly likely to be corrupt and misusing funds, so that didn't particularly surprise me.
We talked about a lot of these anti-gay bills, and you know, Texas has a record 20 of them, and but the gay forces down there say that they're confident that they can defeat them.
Well, look, most of the Oklahoma proposed bills went down the drain.
15 of the 16 went down.
Yeah, so so there is good news. West Virginia didn't vote on their religious entitlement bill. I like calling it religious entitlement. I'm going to try to.
That's a good phrase.
Yeah, convince myself to do that.
And you know, people are fighting back in Idaho. 25 were arrested at the Capitol.
Yes,
there, protesting the fact that they won't pass a simple LGBT rights law.
They've been doing this for several years now. They're relentless. I think they're just fantastic in what they're doing. Let's see, other political news.
Well, in East Grand Rapids, Michigan, they added sexual orientation and gender identity to their non-discrimination ordinance unanimously.
Yeah. Jeb Bush, what is with him? He hires gay people to run his campaign and then signs on Jordan Sekulow,
the
son of Jay Sekulow, as a senior advisor who's a right-wing nut and has been spreading homophobia all over this country and Africa.
We had this really disturbing story in the Times about this right-wing nut and the Christian right. What's his name?
Dale or
David
whatever.
Lane.
Yes.
They are mobilizing to be a major force for the Republican Party in the 2016 elections. They want 1,000 pastors to run for public office in 2016. And folks, pay attention to who's running in your district.
Yeah. Well, Equality California has already endorsed Hillary Clinton for president. Of course, if she doesn't run, they'll find someone else, but it feels a little early.
No, we did.
And also early, lesbian politician Kathy Woolard in Atlanta, who was the head of the city council for a while, announced she's going to run for mayor there in 2017.
In Illinois, the Gay Liberation Network there is alerting us to the fact that Governor Rauner, R-A-U-N-E-R, you know, they're moving ahead on the nomination of Reverend James Meeks to head the Illinois Board of Education. Meeks calls homosexuality an evil sickness, and he's up for a big public position.
In Texas, you talked about the 20 right-wing bills, but out lesbian representative Celia Israel is introducing the no conversion therapy for minors bill there. The Texas Republican platform, of course, endorses conversion therapy.
On the other hand, in Somerville, New Jersey, a teacher at Immaculata High School who posted on Facebook against gay rights has been placed on administrative leave. She is a religion teacher, but she wrote that gay activists want to re-engineer Western civilization into a slow extinction, so that kind of upset her religious overseers.
Yeah. All right. Aaron Schock resigned. What else have we got here? Shall we do the St. Patrick's stuff?
Sure.
Okay. So, good news. In Washington, D.C., they had the first out gay contingent marching in the parade. In Boston, they had two. They had the out vets. And
because it's a veterans parade in Boston.
Yes, and then they brought in the Boston Pride group. But the Veterans for Peace, who a non-gay group, just, you know, progressive veterans who aren't for war, who had supported the gay group's inclusion for years, they are still banned from the parade.
Because they have the word peace in their title.
Exactly.
Peace.
And the gay groups did not stand up for them.
They should have stayed out.
Yeah.
And in New York, you read that there was a gay group in the St. Patrick's Day parade, but it was out at NBC Universal, which is their gay employee marketing group, not the Irish gay groups that have been trying to get in for years. And we have a big protest, big banner, if you go to the next picture, made by Gilbert Baker, "Let Irish gays into Irish parade." A simple enough message.
Yes, but ignored by all present. Actually, we got a little more support from people in the parade overtly this year, people giving us a thumbs up.
They were doing that.
A secret thumbs up.
Yes. Especially for all those high school bands with all those gay kids in them.
The gay music directors coming over and saying, the kids are really proud of you for doing this.
Florida, by the way, advanced their transgender discrimination bill, making it illegal to enter sex-segregated facilities, invalidating protections on the local level as well. And we have that picture, if we can get it, of that trans man in a women's restroom. This is a new trend. We've been shown it to you before.
Yes.
This is a...
This is Michael Hughes in Minnesota, a trans man who took a picture of himself in a women's restroom saying, really, you want me to use the women's restroom because I'm a trans man? I don't think so. I think this is a great campaign. In
New Jersey, part of the hate crimes law...
And actually, a better... well, go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
In New Jersey, part of the hate crimes law that was used to prosecute the persecutor of Tyler Clementi was struck down as unconstitutionally vague, as can happen with these things.
As Kate said, Iowa and Oregon legislators are advancing bans on conversion therapy, although the feeling is that Iowa is going to get stuck in the Senate after passing it in the House. Presbyterians nationally have voted to change their marriage rules and open marriage to same-sex couples on an equal basis.
Part of the way they were able to do it, of course, is that some of the more conservative presbyteries or regions have withdrawn from the church.
Over the years, since they agreed to ordain out gay people.
But it's a 1.8 million member church, and ministers who object to this, by the way, will not be required to perform same-sex marriages. And then the Reformed Jews have elected Rabbi Denise Eger, E-G-E-R, an out lesbian, the president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. She's the first out president. The denomination has been an ally of ours since the 70s.
Absolutely. She will now be the president of, as you say, the Reform Jews, the Central Conference. Two out gay people have run the Reconstructionists. From left to right, Reconstructionists, the most progressive, then Reform, then Conservative, then Orthodox. So we're moving on up in the...
And in Atlanta, out lesbian city council president.
Yeah, we talked about that.
You did that, okay.
In Denver, the coroner there says that the police murdered lesbian Jessie Hernandez, who was sitting in a car with her girlfriend. The cops identified it as a stolen car, and the net result is that they ended up shooting Jessie dead. Terrible story. And in Watertown, New York, Randy Bent, 62 years old, was stabbed, dead, and set on fire by Kyle Box, 18 years old, who had advertised himself as available on Craigslist to show men a good time.
Right.
Terrible story.
Okay, some other marriage news?
Well, I want to mourn a couple of
Yes.
people. Jean Hardesty, who ran Political Research Associates in Boston, which is a fantastic group for monitoring the religious right and the right wing. She had done that for many years, died of cancer at 69 or 70. Del Williams, 92 years old, founded the Eve's Garden sex toys boutique, the first one that was women-oriented specifically, because a clerk at Macy's many years ago gave her a hard time when she tried to buy a vibrator.
It sounds like the scene in A Delicate Balance where they're trying to buy a topless bathing suit.
You have to go on the New York Times website and read the obituary of Del Williams. It is fantastic.
And I didn't know the story behind the directors of Still Alice, the movie that won the Academy Award for our friend Julianne Moore.
Yeah.
But one of the men, they're in a couple, died of ALS. Richard Glatzer. He and his husband Wash Westmoreland did that film.
Yeah, wrote and directed. And congratulations to our actual friend, Melissa Sklarz, who is the new co-chair of the Empire State Pride Agenda Foundation. They, as a very politically successful trans woman, she has worked for many years on many issues in New York State and beyond. And we're still in a huge push to get the New York State Legislature to pass a gender identity and expression non-discrimination bill.
And though I have not met Julianne, she hosts the annual, in a restaurant, the annual Thanksgiving dinner for homeless LGBT youth for New Alternatives, where I'm on the board.
Oh, okay. So she might become a friend of yours.
Maybe. I don't go to the dinner. I leave room for the kids.
Okay.
All right. In marriage news, well,
Yes.
the Supreme Court case is bubbling up, and we talked that there is this dispute over who's going to represent our side. Our side now wants 5 people. The Supreme Court wants 2, but in Michigan, the anti-gay law there will be defended by the former Michigan Solicitor General, John Bursch, who has argued 8 cases before the court just between 2011 and 2013. So they're not lying down.
It's complex. We'll discuss it in greater depth next week. The Alabama Supreme Court, Roy Moore's operation, told probate judge in Alabama, Don Davis, that he can't perform marriages, although he had been ordered to by the federal judge, Callie Grenade. So then he went back to Callie Grenade and said, what am I supposed to do? The Alabama Supreme Court says I can't do marriages. And
issue the licenses.
She says, no stay, you go issue those licenses. So I suspect he will remain doing what he's doing, which is not issue licenses to anybody.
In Arizona, the State Judiciary Ethics Unit issued a guidance that judges who perform wedding ceremonies may not turn away same-sex couples, or they just can't do them at all. It's a judicial conduct rule that bans discrimination based on sexual orientation.
I heard from a viewer who is a former claims rep for the Social Security Administration, and he said, you're right, if a Social Security beneficiary has been overpaid and is asked to repay, they do not have to repay if it wasn't their fault, but they must also prove that they cannot afford to repay. So that's a second part of this. So yes, you don't have to repay if it wasn't your fault that you were overpaid, but you also must prove you are of limited means.
In Puerto Rico, the government announced that it's considering dropping their opposition to same-sex marriage. It's in court in the First Circuit before the Court of Appeals there under Lambda's challenge.
Their brief is due Friday. We'll get the answer. And a gay couple who met and got involved at the University of Alabama many years ago and then went off and became successful and have given money to the university over the years, have now said that they will not leave their $15 to $18 million estate to the university. They offered the university money to fund a community outreach center for LGBT youth and others at the university. They were ignored. They've already given millions to this university, and they were ignored when they made this offer.
The statement about their rejection from the university was somewhat diplomatic, because they're hoping they can turn them around, but I hope they can't.
I don't know how they can turn them around when they were ignored in making this offer.
The Alabama House did pass a bill to allow judges and ministers to refuse to perform same-sex marriages. Ministers, of course, already have that right everywhere. And Matt Staver, the chair of the right-wing Liberty Council, says no matter what the Supreme Court says on same-sex marriage, I will advocate disobedience to it. He said he would no more obey that law than he would turn over a Jew in Germany.
Oh, God.
God bless
You
him.
know, there are some pretty harsh penalties for treason in this country, Matt.
Oh, yeah? Well, tell that to the 47 Republicans who rode to Iran.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Okay.
International news?
Sure.
Dolce and Gabbana, the only family is the natural one, no chemical offsprings and rental uterus.
Well, the interesting thing to me about Dolce and Gabbana is they've been saying terrible things for years, and we haven't protested them. Why?
Yes.
Because they're gay?
No, because no one cared or noticed, and finally Elton John spoke up, and everybody goes, whoa, okay, yes, I see that they're saying this. My favorite was Al Roker, whose kids were born with some assistance of IVF or whatever. And he got irate on the Today Show about this.
All right.
Of course, they called Elton John a fascist. It's ridiculous.
In Peru, there was we have a picture, there's a big demo there in Lima to protest the defeat of the civil union bill. So they're fighting back.
They are, and the Peru Congress, which defeated the civil unions bill, handed out honors to people for their work on LGBT rights. Really? Not to themselves,
Hey,
clearly.
folks, the Swiss, and they're pretty far behind the times, they passed a bill banning discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and a subcommittee approved the marriage equality legislation, so they're moving forward. They only gave women the right to vote about, a couple of years ago.
We got mad at IKEA last year because they censored their own in-house magazine, the version that's published in Russia. They took out a gay family that had been in the magazine because of the no gay propaganda law in Russia. We held a demonstration at IKEA in Red Hook, Brooklyn to protest this. So I'm taking credit for the fact that IKEA magazine has now decided not to publish in Russia because of the gay propaganda law and their desire not to be censoring themselves anymore.
Right. In Berlin, and we have a picture of this young man, Nasser El Ahmed. He came out as gay at 15 to his Lebanese-born parents. His father beat him and poured boiling water over him and threatened to cut his throat. His uncle doused him with gasoline and threatened to set him on fire. And then they kidnapped him and brought him, trying to get him out of the country, and they were stopped at the border. And so they were arrested, all these men who were doing this to him, and their penalty for all this was $1,400. Now, I'm glad they got some penalty.
Yeah.
And the kid is now wanting to dedicate his life to the plight of Muslim gays in some families.
Look, there is action all over the world, which makes me very happy, but we got a long way to go.
We do.
All right, entertainment news. Have we caught up? Have we zipped through so fast?
We have zipped through so fast, we're going to have to fill here now. We're going to have to go back.
All right, well...
no, we got some entertainment news.
We certainly do, and one thing that's interesting is that the TLC TV channel is going to put on a series called All That Jazz.
We have a picture of Jazz.
Jazz is Jazz Jennings, a transgender teenager, 14 years old, and she is going to have an 11-part reality show that is going to premiere this summer. And what's really interesting to me about this is that the E! Network has delayed the Bruce Jenner show. That is off the table at the moment. And the received wisdom about it is that it's because his sons are having trouble with this transition and objecting to it.
Doesn't that make a better show?
I would have thought so.
I mean, I don't know why anybody does these reality shows. I don't know why I did the Larry Wilmore show last week, but I did it because my colleagues wanted us to do that about St. Patrick's.
Well, the Bruce Jenner show is delayed while they deal with this, and, I'll give them credit for not wanting to put that on the air, that conflict. But meanwhile, we have Jazz Jennings on TLC at 14 years old to lead us through her life.
In Going Clear, the new documentary on Scientology that's bowing on HBO March 29th, that deals with how the church uses member secrets like John Travolta's homosexuality against them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if there's any wider notice of the fact that they're outing Travolta. And Madonna got in a little trouble this week. She's, Patricia Arquette, when she spoke up for women at the Academy Awards and said, it's time for people of color and gay people to get on board with women.
Yeah.
We've been standing up for you, really. And then Madonna says, gay rights are way more advanced than women's rights. People are a lot more open-minded to the gay community than they are to women. Here's the reality.
Yes.
Everyone's being discriminated against. Everyone's in trouble. I went to Kate Kendall's NCLR event last night, but before that I went to an event by an organization called National Advocates for Pregnant Women. There are women being arrested and put in jail because they want to have a cesarean, not an abortion, a cesarean.
Is that against God's law?
No, hospitals don't want to do natural births. They want to force women to have cesareans, and if you say no, you can get arrested.
Well, I mean, you know, sometimes when one group thinks another group is doing better, it's like, especially when people think that we're doing great these days, because we're in the papers a lot and we're making some progress. But as if those of you who watch the show know that it's a mixed bag for everybody.
Exactly.
But going back to entertainment news, Out TR Night is joining the cast of It's Only a Play by Terrence McNally, also gay, with Nathan Lane, also gay, coming back on March 31st. Night takes on the role of the British director Frank Finger, that Rupert Grint of Harry Potter created. And
the new season of Dancing with the Stars has premiered with Michael Sam, the out gay football player, as one of the contestants. He had a little trouble with his footwork on the first show. Excuse me for spraying you.
No, I didn't get hit.
But he can twerk. You can watch this show for Michael Sam's rear end and be very entertained.
Well, and I have some shows to recommend. One is on the 20th Century with Kristen Chenoweth. We got a picture of her with Andy Carl. Now, I saw this 100 years ago.
I saw the movie.
Oh, well, my God, that was in the 30s.
Yes.
It's based on a John Barrymore movie, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, it's back on Broadway. It's a great production of a show. It's nonstop farce, you know, also with Peter Gallagher. What I kind of think the show lacks is heart, and I love Comden and Green, but they usually throw a good love story into it that really grabs you. But this one doesn't. It's just fun, and there is some non-traditional casting in the show. The four porters, 3 of them are white. I mean, or at least 2 of them. It's like porters. I mean, come on, that was the Black Union.
They wanted dancers, right?
Yes, they are great dancers. They are the heart of the show. And then the other show I saw this week is Helen Mirren as Elizabeth II in the audience. We have a picture of her. It's enormous fun as she meets prime ministers from Churchill to Cameron over 60 years. And it's a great mix of the personal and the political. It's kind of a smart show. It's popular entertainment.
It's not just like one prime minister
because they interweave it with her life, and they go back and forth. She transforms herself into different ages on stage, going back and forth. It's not just sequential. And
I really do remember when she was crowned in 1952.
Actually, that's part of the show.
Yeah.
That's when she became queen.
Yes.
Oh, so like she can't.
I remember.
She wasn't coronated for like 18 months. And she says in this play, because we don't know what actually they talked about, when she's meeting with Churchill, she says, "Why are we waiting 18 months for this?" And she says, "Is it for your political fortunes?" That's the kind of stuff that's in this play. It's directed by out gay Stephen Daldry, by the way.
I still want Helen Mirren to go back to doing another series of Prime Suspect.
And they're doing a new NBC comedy produced by Ellen called One Big Happy, written by out comedian Liz Feldman, based on her experience with her male best friend.
Yeah, it sounds a little weird.
And how about that Queen Latifah?
What'd she do now?
Well, she won't come out yet, but she has taken the role of bisexual Bessie Smith for an upcoming HBO film.
We talked about that weeks ago. It's not news. I want to recommend a show to those of you in Philadelphia. The Sylvester show, Mighty Real, is going to play there for a few days at the beginning of April 3rd through 5th at the Painted Bride Arts Center. I saw this in New York a few months ago. It's it's a biography, and the guy who wrote it and is producing this, who plays Sylvester, is really compelling and good, and the music is wonderful. It's this whole Mighty Real and other disco music, and it's also the story of how he was involved with the Cockettes in San Francisco, which was a whole part of the story I didn't know. So I certainly wouldn't say it's the greatest thing I ever saw, but it was a lot of fun and very energetic and certainly worth checking out if you're in the mood for something like that. Mighty Real.
In my experience going to the theater, Anne's greatest experience was Pajama Game.
You know, I saw that movie twice when it first came out. We're really dating me in the show this evening, but
okay. But you didn't see, you didn't see on the 20th century when it came out.
No, I did not. And I had a crush on Doris Day in the 1950s and 60s, so that's why I liked the movie.
So it was helpful with your development as a lesbian.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm thrilled we have Kate Kendall in this week. I'm really, really concerned about the right-wing backlash here to everything we're accomplishing. And they're not stupid. They're going after us with these religious entitlement laws and just chipping away every way they can. And they learned a lot from the Roe v. Wade and abortion fight. They learned that they can fight back, that they can undermine our rights, even when it looks like we're being spectacularly successful.
But I have to say, when I came in for this, reading up on all the Utah stuff, more concerned than I am now after talking to Kate.
Yes.
That Utah may be somewhat unique in the way they did things. But I just worry, and I do hope that we maintain transparency as we go forward when we're working on our federal law and all those other kinds of things, so that we don't get saddled with bad exemptions that are quote unquote, leaders of these people in Washington just decide would be good for us.
And as we follow news developments, I think we lose a little of the big picture of the need still to pass statewide non-discrimination laws. And the fact that we only have, until Utah, 21 states that had statewide non-discrimination laws. And this law passed in Utah, flawed as it may be, is the first statewide non-discrimination law passed in a very long time.
And we're still trying to pass statewide protections for transgender people in New York.
Exactly.
Because New York was the last state to pass a sexual orientation bill that did not have transgender in it. After that, the states put it in it. And by the way, the backlash has also prompted our side to get in gear. So for the first time, you have a gay rights bill in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. It's obviously a long way off, or maybe not. If Utah can do it, maybe Arkansas can do it.
And
maybe they'll give up on hating us. Of course, then they end up probably picking on somebody else.
Well, and I would say look at the example of the activists in Idaho who have not gotten what they want yet, have had to engage in years and years of activism, civil disobedience at the Capitol, getting themselves arrested, but they're not giving up. They're wonderful activists and a wonderful model for people around the country. You don't have to get arrested, but certainly speaking up on an ongoing basis with dignity and self-respect and demanding to be treated with respect is the crucial step for all of us.
As we have for 25 years in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York. And you know what occurred to me? If they would just, they let this gay group go from NBC. If they just let us go in the thing, there wouldn't be the big protest on the side, which is exposing all the people in the parade to the gay cause.
Look, you remember the Matthew Shepard March where we all got trampled by the cops in the street? All we wanted to do was march down Fifth Avenue for about 30 blocks and hold a candlelight vigil, and they wouldn't let us do that, and they proceeded to create this havoc. It's so unnecessary, but that's what they do.
Right.
So we'll be here every week to report on it.
And if you want to be on our email list, write to me, andyhum@aol.com, with any of your comments or requests.
We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Within reason.